They were taken as boys, forged into weapons, and unleashed upon an empire, not to serve but to control. These were the Janissaries, and their story is as terrifying as it is true. They were never mere foot soldiers. Imagine an army so loyal, so feared that even the Sultan, the most powerful man in the Ottoman Empire, dared not cross them. They weren't born into privilege. They were taken, ripped from their families, stripped of their past, and remade into elite soldiers through a system as cold as it was calculated. The Janissaries were the sharpened edge of Ottoman might, a living blade wielded by the empire with chilling precision. Forged not only in iron but in silence and obedience, they moved through the Ottoman world like a tide cloaked in shadow. For centuries, they executed their duties without question, defying enemies, rewriting destinies, and often turning on their own masters. Cities fell before them. Sultans trembled in their presence. Their legacy is not merely etched into the pages of Ottoman history, it is seared into the collective memory of civilization, a haunting echo of power built on fear. In this video, we uncover the most chilling truths about the Janissaries, the terrifying force that rose from silence to dominate one of history's greatest empires, the machinery of obedience, the Devshirme system. The story of the Janissaries begins not on the battlefield, but in the hushed corners of Balkan villages. Christian children vanished from their homes, not abducted by bandits or invaders, but taken under royal decree. This practice was known as the Devshirme, or the collection. It was a systematic and state-sanctioned mechanism through which the Ottoman Empire drew strength. Families living under Ottoman rule were compelled to surrender their sons, often between the ages of 8 and 18, to the Sultan's agents. Once seized, the transformation began. These boys were converted to Islam and immersed in a rigorous regime of training, designed to erase their past and rebuild them from the ground up. They were chosen for their intelligence, physical strength, and potential for obedience. This was no ordinary indoctrination. It was a complete reconstruction of identity. Taught Turkish and military discipline and subjected to a strict hierarchy, the recruits were raised to exhibit unyielding loyalty to the Sultan above all else. This was not a chaotic process. It was deliberate, efficient, and refined over generations. The Janissary training grounds were less academies than factories, producing elite warriors stripped of prior loyalties and forged anew in the service of the empire. As the 17th century Moldavian prince and chronicler Dmitry Kantemir wrote, "The Grand Signior has no slaves more faithful than those he has taken from their own fathers." The irony is hard to ignore. What began as an act of coercion often became a pathway to prestige and immense power. Though their origins were rooted in forced conscription, many Janissaries rose to prominence, leading armies, governing provinces, and serving as the Sultan's closest advisors. Yet, despite their success, their beginnings as outsiders, foreign-born boys turned imperial instruments, were never forgotten. To the Christian populations left behind, they were a reminder of loss. To the Ottoman state, they were both a symbol of control and a seed of future rebellion. The Devshirme was more than a policy. It was a method of imperial reshaping, an insidious conquest without swords that left entire generations suspended between two worlds, claimed by both yet truly belonging to neither, from warriors to political power brokers. At the peak of their power, the Janissaries were far more than a standing army. They were the very backbone of Ottoman military supremacy, elite troops trained to march into the jaws of death without hesitation. Their reputation for bravery and discipline spread across continents. However, as their battlefield success grew, so too did their ambitions. The force designed to serve imperial will began to manipulate it. Originally, strict rules governed their existence. They were not allowed to marry, accumulate wealth, or engage in commerce. Their lives were meant to be wholly devoted to the state. But by the late 1500s, those boundaries began to blur. As the Janissaries accrued influence in military and civic affairs, they embedded themselves deeper into Ottoman society. Wealth and privileges once forbidden became accessible. Families, once terrified of the Devshirme, began to bribe officials to secure places for their sons within this prestigious corps. What was once a symbol of subjugation became a coveted status. Rebellions cloaked in order. When the Janissaries rebelled, they did so not with random acts of fury, but with chilling calculation. Their uprisings were not the panicked revolts of desperate men. They were coordinated strikes aimed directly at the core of power. From the 1600s onward, their revolts became a recurring threat, as destabilizing internally as any external war. Perhaps the most shocking example came in 1622, when Sultan Osman II dared to challenge Janissary autonomy by forming a rival military corps. The young reformer hoped to dilute their influence and return control to the palace. But the Janissaries did not take kindly to the challenge. They stormed the palace, captured the Sultan, and ensured he never left his prison alive. His assassination was not just a tragedy, it was a terrifying precedent. Then came 1656, and with it, the grotesque spectacle known as Vaka-e Vakvakiye, or the event of the Vakvak tree. Dissatisfied with state mismanagement, economic turmoil, and Janissary corruption, the people of Istanbul, joined by elements of the military, took matters into their own hands. A list of condemned officials was nailed to a tree in the city square. Men accused of betrayal, incompetence, or greed. One by one, these officials were executed. Their bodies hung from the branches in a macabre display of popular vengeance. The mythical Vakvak tree, said to bear the heads of the damned, had found its real-world counterpart. This was not a mere riot, it was a reckoning. It signaled that the empire had not only lost control of its soldiers, but also of the soul of its governance. Though the state survived the bloodletting, the event left an open wound. The Janissaries, meant to protect the realm, had shown once again that they could destabilize it with surgical precision. The Palace of Shadows. Not every conflict involving the Janissaries played out in public squares. Many of the most decisive power shifts occurred within the shadowed corridors of Topkapi Palace. Here, amid the quiet rustle of silk and steel, the Janissaries performed another role, that of silent executioners. They became the hand that removed rivals discreetly and efficiently. As power struggles within the empire grew more complex, sultans and viziers came to depend on the Janissaries for more than protection. They were trusted with eliminating threats, real or perceived. Political enemies could vanish overnight, erased from both court records and memory. These were not messy purges, but precisely calculated operations. No fanfare, no spectacle, just a silent disappearance. Yet the Janissaries' loyalty, once presumed to be absolute, grew more conditional with time. They began aligning with factions, manipulating internal rivalries, and even acting out of self-interest to maintain their grip on influence. They could be both sword and serpent, executing justice or perpetuating ambition, depending on the shifting winds of court politics. Toppling thrones. Their ability to remove a sultan was not just theoretical, it was tried and tested. Sultan Osman II's murder in 1622 had already demonstrated the Janissaries' lethal reach. But the empire did not learn quickly. In 1707, Sultan Selim III attempted to modernize the military through the creation of the Nizam-e-Sedid, or New Order Army, aimed at breaking the Janissary monopoly. His reward was betrayal. The Janissaries revolted, deposed him, and ensured his death. A pliable figurehead, Mustafa IV, was installed in his place. These were not isolated incidents. They were a recurring pattern of power inversion. Each time a ruler dared to reform the Janissary corps, the response was swift and bloody. In a state supposedly ruled by divine sovereignty, it became clear. The Sultan wore the crown, but the Janissaries held the sword and knew how to use it. Legacy of power and paradox. The Janissaries were a paradox, discipline incarnate yet prone to chaos, loyal to the Sultan yet often his greatest threat. Created through coercion, they rose to the pinnacle of power and then reshaped that very power structure to suit their will. They were the makers of empires and the unmakers of order. Their existence challenged the very foundations of loyalty, authority, and statehood. What began as an elite military institution designed to protect the Ottoman Empire evolved into a political force capable of steering and even toppling that empire. In time, they were no longer the empire's weapon. They became its wielder. Their downfall in the 19th century was not just the end of a military unit. It was the final chapter in a long and complex saga of power, obedience, rebellion, and ruin. As we reflect on their history, we must ask, were the Janissaries the guardians of the empire or the authors of its decline? Were they protectors of state order or agents of its corrosion? As the Ottoman scholar Khatib Çelebi warned in Mizanul Haq, a state built on oppression will end in ruin. And in the tale of the Janissaries, we see both the rise and the unraveling of imperial ambition. Let us know what you think in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more untold stories from history.